Charlie's Angels originated as a TV series in the 70s. It followed three female private investigators as they followed the cases assigned to them by Charlie, the man who owns the Townsend Detective Agency, and speaks to them through a voice box. The overall premise of Charlie's Angels does not change in the 2000 and 2019 film continuations of the series. But what I did notice was that the 2000s version of the series, particularly Full Throttle, really leaned into more religious undertones for the movie. Now, most audiences may only remember Charlie's Angels 2000s for its campy fights, overt fetishizations, and wearing many cultures as costumes, and one would think a film like this one has no business in a rant, but as a person who analyzes and reaches for everything, that is exactly what I will do today. So it may seem obvious that there's going to be some religious undertones in a series called Charlie's Angels, but as I mentioned before, I really only see this underlining element in Full Throttle and hardly in any of the other iterations. But it's not something I've seen discussed much before regarding this series, so I will dive in and do so today. Starting with Madison Lee, she is a former detective for the agency and the main antagonist in the Full Throttle movie. She is also the reason this video was created, simply because her entire storyline throughout the movie mirrors the story of Satan. She was once an angel but became fallen after coming to the belief that she was better than the other angels, the agency, and Charlie himself. We even get a good few lines that clearly showcase her God complex.
Why be an angel when I can play God?
I was never good. I was great.
This greatly mirrors some of the stories out there regarding Satan and how he came to be, how he was once an angel in God's court but was cast out once he questioned his authority. These red bottoms don't help her case either. The Devil Wears Louis Vuitton, or whatever that movie was called. To put more emphasis on Madison Lee's betrayal of the agency and what it stands for at the time, we see her performing actions seen as taboo, such as using guns, right? Now, I know that behind the scenes, Drew Barrymore advocated for no gun use, but in universe, at least for these particular angels, I assume they don't use guns because they don't intend to kill. Thou shalt not kill and all that, you know? Like the commandments. And then there's Madison's death scene itself, which literally has her falling into a pit of fire. Shorty went straight to hell, Natalie spoke it into existence.
Enjoy heaven. Go to hell.
In no way am I justifying who Madison Lee decided to become and what she did, but it could be argued that being a part of the Townsend Agency requires a certain level of faith or religion demands. The angels are constantly putting their lives on the line to solve these cases given to them by an unknown rich man behind a voice box. And there's no further questions about that? Okay. Naturally, you would think one would wonder who is that behind the curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz. At the end of the day, neither we nor the angels know much about Charlie. Since the TV series and the 2000s iterations are the same Charlie, we can infer a bit about him from those two sources. We know he's rich, we know he pays, we know he was in the special forces, we know he's supposedly a flirt due to entertaining a lot of women in the TV series. He's often framed as this good guy who donates to charities, but yet there's a whole conversation to be had on how the rich utilizes charities for tax cuts or to funnel money towards organizations that are going to benefit their political agendas. And that's not to say it makes him uncharitable, but it must be remembered that donating is an act he probably greatly benefits from. And for some employees, Charlie's level of privacy isn't bad. Privacy is important, especially in this day and age. A job's a job, am I right? But it's pretty much established that the angels have strong morals, and I doubt they'd be okay with their boss being immoral. Or maybe they would. You can't hoard millions without a little corruption, I guess. And the angels are smart enough to figure out if their boss is shady, so who knows, maybe everyone's complicit in the situation. I, however, will also point out in both the original series and 2000s films, both sets of angels have a healthy curiosity as to who Charlie is. But of course, that's not a boundary they try and cross, and they continue to stop his enemies' attempts to take away his privacy. Going back to the first movie, Eric Knox claims Charlie betrayed his father, and we only know otherwise because Charlie said so? Of course, a discerning individual is not going to take the word of a lying asshole over the word of their boss. I'm just saying there's a lot we don't know about Charlie. We don't know how he benefits from the angel solving certain cases from certain clients. There could be other factors involved besides simply being paid to look into these cases. You know what I mean? They could be a friend. They could be a politician. They could be an investor. Hell, in the 2000s movies, both antagonists were direct enemies of the agency itself. You gotta start to wonder how many enemies this guy has. And even though Charlie does die a little bit before the events of the 2019 continuation, the Townsend Agency does manage to become an organization that's pretty lax about direct deadly casualties of innocents from their actions, and they have long-term members that have become corrupt. And I'm not surprised. With the head of the company being so anonymous, there's not a sure way for most of the employees to know when there's a change in leadership, when none of your employees know who you are. Kelly Garrett, one of the original angels from the TV series, has taken over the Townsend Agency by the time the 2019 film has rolled around. And she still uses the alias Charlie, but she uses a voice changer to sound like him and communicate with the other Bosleys and angels. To me, that's a security issue if I've ever heard of one. I like to see how the Townsend leadership structure looks like now in the age of AI, because anyone can fake a video or fake a voice. They're liable to be hacked. Though Charlie's possible villainy is just speculation at the end of the day, it's certainly something to think about. Moving on to the second reason this video was created, Dylan Saunders. I believe Dylan is the most thoroughly explored angel in the 2000 series, quite possibly due to an inner struggle of inferiority she has with herself that's absent in Alex and Natalie, as far as we can see. Or maybe the focus on Dylan was simply due to Drew Barrymore being a producer of the film. I don't know. Either way, Dylan comes from a much more rebellious background than the other angels and has a habit of becoming involved with the worst men. Except you, Chad. She struggles with a sense of imposter syndrome and feels as if she's putting the other angels in danger due to her past. She doesn't feel that she's pure of heart and as deserving of being called an angel. Now, I'm no preacher or professional, but I've heard a story or two from the book. So it's interesting that Dylan feels this way about herself because Jesus, allegedly, often reached out to and befriended those that were not traditionally considered pure by society standards. You know, like prostitutes. And in the moment when Dylan's struggling to have faith in herself, here comes a quote-unquote angel who appears to speak with her, the angel being Kelly Garrett. Kelly was essentially the Dylan of her group in a way because she grew up a bit of a rebel, participated in petty crimes, which I feel adds on another layer of complexity to the scene, which has one of my favorite quotes.
Angels are like diamonds. They can't be made, you have to find them.
And just look at this scene's framing of Kelly Garrett in the light. Like, she's a literal angel reaching out to a believer who is having trouble believing. The framing of the scene did make it seem like Kelly was no longer alive, as if she was a spirit. But again, we now know due to the 2019 continuation that she's alive and well and has inherited the Townsend Agency. All that being said, it speaks volumes to me that Dylan is the only angel out of all versions of the series to have ever caught a glimpse of Charlie. Almost as if she's the only angel that's ever needed to see him to have more confidence that she's exactly where she's supposed to be, doing what she's supposed to do. In this context, it's a sign from God, if you will. And I interpret all of this way because at the end of the first movie, Natalie says something along the lines of, "How will we know you exist, Charlie, if you never show yourself?" To which he responds,
"Faith, angels. It's called faith."
Which is all that religion is based on, really, faith. There's no concrete evidence that God exists. I really do value Dylan Saunders as a character, and I think this is due to the amount of depth we got on her. She is the most relatable to most people, at least in comparison to the super optimistic Natalie or the perfect rich girl that Alex can seem like. I really remember empathizing with her when she was afraid the other angels would move on without her. This reaction right here, when she thought Natalie was getting married and may leave the agency, is chef's kiss, perfect. I feel you, Dylan. And it does come from a place of not feeling that she's as good as the other angels, not to mention that out of all of them, she seemingly has the least amount of stability, with no stable relationship and no on-screen house, no on-screen family, even though Natalie didn't really have any on-screen family either. In the first movie, Dylan was living on a dock with the Chad guy, so I can see how it becomes easy for her to feel this way. I don't have as much to say about Natalie and Alex regarding any of the religious parallels in the movie. The only thing worth noting to me is that I assume seeing Charlie in real life is probably not necessary for encouraging them in their work or adding to their individual journeys, which is why Dylan seeing him sticks out to me. I do think it's pretty hilarious that Alex's father thinks his daughter is a prostitute in Full Throttle, but in the end he supports her anyway, so we love that. And I imagine Bosley as a preacher in this whole big analogy simply because of his role of being a connection between the girls and Charlie. The Bosleys in general seem to be the most familiar with Charlie in all iterations, but this thought process could be a reach. And just to add on to my case of the many religious theatrics that occur in the movie, we learn of the Thin Man's and Shia LaBeouf's origins being that of an orphanage full of nuns. The same nunnery the girls have to dress up for to get into and get information. Thin Man's own name is derived from St. Anthony, Watcher of the Mute. We also get a pretty good shot of this "Only God Will Judge Me" tattoo on Seamus. I want to count this death scene and I don't know why. They kind of make a cross if you tilt Seamus a bit. And just a quick shout out to Full Throttle soundtrack. Dylan and Seamus were screaming "Living on a Prayer" by Bon Jovi at the top of their lungs during her flashback scene. And during this whole sequence when the angels are sneaking into the building to get the drop on Madison, a song called "A Girl Like You" by Eden Collins is playing in the background. But if you look the scene up where Seamus pops up in here, the lyrics literally are exactly, and I quote, "You made me acknowledge the devil in me. Hope to God I'm talking metaphorically." In all other iterations of Charlie's Angels, there wasn't as much emphasis on religious undertones like Full Throttle had. Soundtracks for both the first 2000s film and the 2019 film did have songs that often contained the word angel, but that was the extent of the reference. After all, one of the main promotional songs for the 2019 film was "Don't Call Me Angel" by Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus, and Lana Del Rey, with the song primarily focusing on being an independent woman. Kind of like how the first Charlie's Angels film had "Independent Woman" by Destiny's Child. But yeah, in "Don't Call Me Angel" there are references to heavens and devils, but there wasn't a scene where the music and those lyrics were heavily the focus. Nothing like what Seamus had in this scene right here with the Eden Collins song. TLDL, those specific lyrics of the song were not heavily being brought to the audience's attention, and that is the difference between the two, and how heavily I feel it might be pushing that religious narrative. And as I previously mentioned, there was also that nod towards religion at the end of the first film when Charlie mentioned having faith. But for completeness, I'll also list the songs in the first Charlie's Angels films that reference angels. So, when Dylan wakes up on Chad's boat, "Just Call Me Angel" by Juice Newton plays. When Natalie first wakes up from her dream, "Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel" by the Tavares plays. "Angel's Eye" by Aerosmith plays when Natalie chases the creepy thin man with a race car. And "Angel" by Rod Stewart plays when the angels wash up on the beach in front of Charlie's house. As for the 2019 film, almost all of the original soundtrack songs with the word angel in the title were instrumentals. Other than that, I don't see any other Easter eggs or references towards religion in the other movies. Now with the 1976 series, you do have to take my observation with a grain of salt, because my knowledge of it is based off online research and watching a few episodes. But as far as I know, they didn't heavily leave in references or nods towards Christianity or any other Abrahamic belief either. Although Kelly Garrett was adopted and raised by nuns, I suppose the creepy thin man adopted bits of her backstory in the second film. But that is it for my video. I hope you enjoyed. Leave any likes and comments down below, and I will see you in the next video.